Welcome back to the Juan Palomino Breakthrough Podcast. I'm Jenna, and I'm here with Juan, my husband, a coach, a speaker, and someone who has walked with so many people through some of life's toughest moments. And today, we're talking about something that every single person listening has struggled with at some point: forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things we're called to do. When someone has hurt you, betrayed you, or broken your trust, the last thing you want to do is let it go. But what if forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened? What if it's actually about setting yourself free? Today, we're having a real conversation about forgiveness, what it is, what it isn't, and how to move forward without carrying the weight of bitterness.
Wow, that's going to be a tough one, but I believe that it's going to be also one that helps a lot of people, because I know a lot of people struggle with this. So welcome back, everybody.
Yeah. Juan, I think a lot of people, if not most people, struggle with forgiveness because they misunderstand what it actually means. Would you be able to break that down for us?
Well, there's two sides to forgiveness. There's what it is and also what it isn't. So forgiveness is not about forgetting what's happened to you. It's also not excusing what's happened or what people did to you. And here's the kicker, ready? It's not even reconciling. In other words, maybe even going back to that relationship and having a full-blown relationship with that person on a day-to-day basis. But what it is, it's about releasing, I believe, releasing the hold of that hurt that has on you.
Yeah, that's so powerful. A lot of times we think forgiving means saying it's okay when it's not, right?
Yeah.
I know that when someone apologizes, we say it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But true forgiveness isn't denying the pain. It's deciding that the pain won't control you anymore.
That's a good point. That's definitely a good point. If I could share with you guys, that are listening, thank you again for tuning in. One of the hurts that I deal with when I speak to a lot of the people that I'm coaching with is hurt from the past, particularly hurt that we believe that we've put in our past and we go, oh, this is not impacting me anymore. We tend to forget about it and we think that we moved on. But the truth is, any unforgiveness that we haven't dealt with, it's, someone said, I can't quote them, but just bear with me, said that our body keeps count of the trauma and the stuff that we've gone through. And so unforgiveness is something that we carry into our current relationships. Example, again, like I was saying earlier, was, I went through a season in my life where there was abandonment that I hadn't dealt with. And I didn't know how that abandonment was affecting me in my current relationships. And that abandonment came, when my father, made the decision to leave his marriage of 23, 24 years with my mom. And I remember obviously getting angry about it because of the confusion that it brought. And also I remember saying, I never want to become like my dad, right? And that fueled me to proving him wrong of why he left us, how that hurt really drove me to success because I had to prove to him that the injury that he caused was not there, but that I was going to use it to prove to him that we didn't need him. But I didn't know that the initial rejection of abandonment, because that abandonment really caused me to feel like I wasn't worthy, like I wasn't worth the fight for him to change his life, which were circumstances, again, no need to go into detail, but he couldn't change, so hence he left. And so I thought, man, I'm not worthy of that change, of that transformation that he needed in order for him to stay with my mom. The secondary emotion was anger. And that's the one that I focused on. But I really never got over it because what happened is the lack of forgiving him led me to not deal with my relationships properly. And I didn't know how to forgive. And so what did I do? Either there's two ways you deal with things that press you, challenges that you go through. You either fight or it's flight. And I learned flight. I learned to flee when there was a challenge or when there was opposition in relationships. I learned to abandon things. It's true what professionals, psychologists say is that things are more caught, CAUGHT, than taught. And so what I caught, the model that was given to me is when there's opposition is to flee, to fly away versus to stand in there and fight. I don't know if that helped, but.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I think when we don't forgive, we think we're holding power over the person who hurt us. But in reality, it's like they say, we're drinking the poison and expecting them to suffer, right?
Yeah.
So why do you think that unforgiveness keeps people stuck?
Well, we think that by not forgiving the person that's offended us, that we're causing them harm. It's this whole thing of like, oh, if I don't forgive them, then it's still hurting them. If I don't forgive them, then I have some sort of control. And it's this false control that really keeps the person that hasn't forgiven, hence me, if I haven't forgiven, in a prison cell.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is that prison cell, we're giving the other person the key to it. And what's the key? It's forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not letting that person off the hook, but it's releasing ourselves from bitterness, from resentment. And like I mentioned earlier, this anger that kept me in the prison. Again, it's this false sense of, oh, I'm in control because I'm not going to forgive them, but it's not. You're actually giving the other person control over your emotions. And you carry this physical burden, and then that burden translates into the relationships that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
That could be your spouse, or if there's a breakup or a divorce, then that's the current spouse you're with in that new blended relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That is the relationship with your kids, relationship with a business partner, or the people that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is like we project that onto other people, or like I was saying in the church hurts, right? That we start building walls because we don't want to be hurt again. And I think too, when we're drinking the poison, expecting the other person to die, or like you said, we're in the prison cell, they don't even know.
No, they moved on. They moved on, right? They moved on and they're just like, whatever. And we're still thinking that they remember. They probably don't even remember the hurt.
Or they may not even know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. They don't even know of the harm that they've caused. We believe in a saying, and that saying is this: hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're a person that is hurt, you're going to continue to hurt others.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is not even intentionally at times.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, because you're still carrying around that in you.
Yeah. I've also heard that healed people heal people.
Come on. See?
Yeah,
Yes. Heal people, heal other people. Yeah, because you recognize it and you see the freedom that you receive. I know the freedom that I've received by going through a process of looking at my life and looking at, how I've injured others. I have this saying when I'm coaching people is it's so much easier to look at outside the window versus looking in a mirror.
Oh, for sure.
When you look in a mirror, then you have to look inside and go, man, what are the things that I'm really dealing with? And honestly, it's hard to look at things from the past. The reason we call it the past is because we want to move past it. We want to move forward. But let me tell you this, if you listen to this, you're not really moving forward. You're still stuck in that hurt, in that disappointment, in that bitterness and resentment, because things are going to trigger that. And you might think, oh, but this is not coming from the past, but it really is.
Yeah, I like the example that you've used before of driving with the parking brake on.
Oh, man. Isn't that true? You have this, you could be, I said, you can be driving a Ferrari, a beautiful Ferrari, and everyone's so impressed. And you could even be on the HOV lane, that is the carpool lane. And no one in front of you, no one behind you, but the unforgiveness is the parking brake that's on.
Mm.
You have this 400 plus horsepower vehicle that can go 400, actually 160 to 200 miles per hour, but you're stuck and you don't know what it is. It's the parking brake. It's the lack of forgiveness.
Yeah. So I've heard it said that forgiveness isn't about setting them free. It's about setting yourself free.
Yeah.
But how do you actually get there?
That's a great question. Again, it's looking at your life. I'm going to say it this way. It's an inventory. You take inventory of your life and you look at where you're at. Again, it's you look in the mirror and you really go, okay, why am I stuck? Why is it that every time I'm in a new relationship or a relationship, there always seems to be a wall. There always seems to be a place that I get to, and then things either blow up, things fall apart, or I cause new harm, new hurt to people. And I found myself in a place where I was like, something's wrong. You know something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. You have to look backwards, not forward. You have to look at your past and go, ask yourself this question. If I see the person that hurt me, said something to me, did something to me, am I avoiding them? Do I avoid them? Or can I have a conversation? Actually, a pastor friend of mine said, can you pray for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, what a question. Can you pray for the person that hurt you? And if you can't, then you know that there's something still there.
Yeah.
There's still a hook. Let's call it a hook that's, in your flesh or in your soul that has not permitted you to let them go, to release them, to forgive them.
Yeah. I agree. There's somebody in my life that I've had to forgive over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have contact with them, sometimes I get this feeling of like, ugh. And I have to ask myself, what is that? And I realize, oh, I have to forgive this person again. It's just like a root of like unforgiveness
Mm-hmm.
that I have to check in my heart. And I think sometimes we realize that like forgiveness is just not a one-time thing, right? It's something that we
choose daily.
Yeah.
And it's releasing them daily.
Right.
Now, so let me focus on two different types of forgiveness. There's the forgiveness that, you had an encounter with someone, or when you were younger, you used to be around someone and you're no longer around them.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, that's easier. Okay. Depending on what kind of forgiveness, amends and so on needs to be made.
What about if it's somebody at church?
Well, let me go deeper. So let's talk about the other one, the one you just mentioned, the
Right.
daily one. You live with that person.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a constant, like, I have to forgive, I have to forgive. What I encourage you, if you're in a situation where you're like, well, I go to work with them every day. I work with them. It's a boss. It's, or I live with the person that I need to forgive. And there are healthy boundaries. There are ways that could be effective for you to set healthy boundaries so that you don't find yourself in the same predicament, the same thing over and over. Insanity is expecting a different result over and over,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing changes.
Yeah.
The change sometimes comes within us. We have to create the change. One of the 5 words that I help, my coachees with is that doesn't work for me. At first, the person, when you set boundaries, is going to be like, what? What do you mean that doesn't work for you? Because they're not used to you setting healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the way the person speaks to you or the way the person raises their voice at you when there's an argument. It could be completely opposite of that, being stonewalled, where you're treated with no conversation or like you don't exist. Like those are things that are abuse as well. And so how we can deal with those situations are by setting healthy patterns, with especially the people that we encounter or have encounters with or we live with every single day. Biblically, Matthew 18 tells us how to address these challenging people in our lives. The first part is you go directly to the person and let them know of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And you call them out with love. The intention, again, is not to be revengeful or to prove to them that you're superior to them. No. It's going with humility and addressing the hurt, what they said, what they didn't do, or what you expected of them. That's a whole other conversation of expectations that we set on people and they don't meet them. And so that leaves us with resentments. But you go directly to them and address it. And if there's a change, you make amends. And if the person makes amends to you and says, I apologize for that, then you want a person back. But if they don't, then you want to involve someone else in that conversation. Okay, so the Bible says you take two people and you address them. Now, if there isn't change after that, then it says bring the church. Right? You bring someone with authority. Now, the third time that it's addressed and that there's no change, then there's something that's very, let's call it challenging for a lot of people to do.
So what do you mean there's no change?
Meaning that if you address, so example, let's say that you address the change and the change is this, hey, don't talk to me this way, meaning let's say using profanity.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just cusses at you, towards you, and you say, hey, that doesn't work for me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the person says, oh, I'm sorry, like I won't do it again. But the person does it again multiple times, maybe once, 2, 3, 4 more times. Then you bring someone else and say, hey, we need some help. You need some counseling. You need some therapy. You need to talk to someone about this, your anger, whatever. And the person doesn't do that. Or let's say they do it once or twice, but then they go back to it. Then you want to address it with someone that's biblically grounded and say, hey, if it's in the church or not in the church, you bring that person and say, you need to help me with this. We need help above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that doesn't change, then there has to be healthier, stricter boundaries. Again, forgiveness is forgiving, but it doesn't mean reconciling or being in a full-blown relationship with that person if there's abuse, right? There's verbal abuse, there's sexual abuse, there's all kinds of other sexual abuse. There's even financial abuse. There's so many things that, again, we can go and steer into. But I would say if you find yourself in any of those situations where it's constantly occurring, then you need to seek outside help.
Yeah, I think sometimes the hardest thing about forgiveness is feeling like we're letting someone get away with what they did. But when we trust that God is the ultimate judge, then we can release for the need of revenge.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there's a scripture that says that we have to leave, justice up to God and God will avenge us. We have to trust in God. We don't have to avenge ourselves. We don't have to pay back that person that, stole from us or robbed us or, cheated on us, whatever that is, broke our hearts or whatever that is. We got to trust that God will avenge us. We have to forgive. One of the big things that I had to learn in my life, 10 plus years ago is that I'm not God. And I'm not here to fix people. I'm not here to avenge myself. I just need to trust that person into God's hands. And what God taught me also is that he had to work in my heart and transform me because I was an vengeful person. I wanted to revenge. I wanted to revenge. I wanted to see it. I wanted to feel it. And that just, God showed me how bitter and angry I was.
Right, because then you're not living the life of peace. Again, you're going back to drinking the poison, expecting the other person to die.
And can I just say this? I had to mature and not walk around and be a person that's always offended. Have you ever met that person? No matter what they hear or what they see on TV or something on social media, they're always offended. I was like, man, can someone have that thin skin? Where somebody says something, they look at you weird, or you're driving on the freeway and they cut you off, and immediately it's like, oh, they're doing that to me. That should be a trigger, not a trigger. That should be a signal, a sign for you to be like, let's look internally of something that you haven't dealt with, something that you're still carrying with you that immediately offends you. Okay, we listen. Especially if you're a follower of Jesus, we can't be offended easily.
Mm-hmm.
We need to learn to let go and let God. And what does that mean specifically? We need to let go and say, okay, God, that person that cut me off on the freeway, it's so easy to think negative. Oh, they're probably running late, or, this idiot woke up late, and the alarm didn't go off, and because we've done that,
Mm-hmm.
number one. But that's a story that we tell ourselves. You know what I've learned? That I can also tell myself a positive story.
Mm-hmm.
That person's child is probably sick. They probably have a high fever, or they're going towards a spouse that just called them and is at the hospital and is about to have a baby. You know what I learned, Jenna? It's a story anyways.
Right.
Tell yourself a positive story. It doesn't have to always be a negative one. Because if you tell yourself a negative story all the time, then we're walking around being easy targets to be offended.
Yeah, I think it was Myron Golden that said, being judgmental and curious can't coexist in
I
the
love that.
same.
I love Myron Golden. Shout out to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, either you're, again, curious of what's going on and have a curiosity, with a heart that's soft, or you're offended all the time, judgmental, and walking around calloused.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what kind of believer is that? A believer in Christ that's always offended and always walking around with a sour face.
Well, I think that's why we get called hypocrites so often, because we do walk around so judgmental all the time. So if we can change that to being curious.
A different narrative. It's
Yeah.
a different narrative. It's a story. Listen, it's a story you tell yourself anyway. Why not tell yourself a better story so when you arrive wherever you're going, you have a better outlook in life, you have a better attitude. And here's the other part, because I said earlier, you take an inventory, then you don't have that many offenses to be dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
There's less offense in your life. Hence, you're going to be more positive.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're holding on to something today, we just want to encourage you, start the process. It won't happen overnight and it won't always feel easy.
That's right.
But your freedom is worth it.
Absolutely. So remember this. We have so much to be thankful for. I want you to focus on gratitude. I think we forget, how much really we are blessed. We are blessed tremendously. Listen, you're listening to this podcast, technology, even having a phone to listen to it, even what we've shared here, if it's blessed you, if it's helped you to look at forgiveness from a different perspective. I mean, have gratitude. Reflect on your journey. There's a reason why things have happened. Is to help you grow.
Mm.
Again, there's so many things that we encounter, positive or negative. But even the negative things, if you go with an outlook of saying, these things are happening not to me, but for me, that's a different outlook.
Mm-hmm.
And what is God doing with this? How is he helping me intentionally to grow? Okay. Opposition needs to happen in order for you to grow. And so I want to encourage you before we end this podcast is, what are the offenses that you're still carrying around that you need to let go as you finish hearing this podcast? Maybe you pause the podcast and you just pray and say, God, help me to forgive. Even if you start moving towards the direction of listen to this, becoming willing to forgive the person.
Mm.
That would be a huge win and gratitude that you can carry with you today. Maybe you don't forgive the person, but you become willing to forgive because God has forgiven you for so much.
Yeah. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you're subscribed, because next week we're tackling something just as challenging: trusting again after betrayal. How do you know when to let someone back in? How do you rebuild trust without getting hurt again? And when is it okay to walk away for good? We're breaking it all down again next Monday.
See you then.